All right, let's continue here now. The crisis at Eskom continues to spiral with no obvious end in sight. The state-owned utility is currently implementing stages 5 and 6 load shedding. It fights breakdowns at its underperforming coal-fired power stations. Now, let's discuss this further. We're now joined via Zoom by David Lipschitz, CEO and founder of My Power Station. David, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Now, the very first question, David, would be, would declaring the current energy crisis a national state of disaster solve the current power crisis we're seeing? How would this play out practically?
Good afternoon, Nati, and all the watchers and listeners. Very good to be on your program. Eskom brought out a document last month outlining their action plan for speeding up procurement. And in that action plan, they've reduced things like 57 days down to 19 days, 3 months down to 30 days for EIAs, etc. These things worry me because EIAs, environmental impact assessments, have a particular process which involves the public. Sometimes companies overlook requirements in the environment that experts, whether they're bird experts or animal experts, or even archaeologists, might miss in the environment. And these things need to be looked at. Now, one could say that speeding up from 3 months to 1 month is a great thing, but the government have really had 15 years since 2008 to really solve the crisis. Declaring a state of disaster worries me even more because, Parliament has an oversight role in a normal democracy, which we should be. And if we have declared a state of disaster, we're giving ministers the responsibility to deal with issues that Parliament should have oversight on. And there are specialist committees in Parliament, and those specialist committees need to be able to look over the shoulder of the ministers. So I worry that the ministers will get way too much power, way too much control. The oversight committees won't be looking at what they're doing in enough detail. Shortening the time is worrying. Basically what we need to change, South Africa needs to change its strategy in order to solve the crisis. And so far we haven't seen that.
And just based on that, there is the short-termism that is seen with this national state of disaster. So some experts even saying that, the view that there's no short-term solution when it comes to recovering Eskom's coal-fired power stations. And that speaks to exactly that, the concern that all of this is viewed as declaring this national state of disaster will somehow miraculously end load shedding, which is certainly not the case. So we don't need, some short-termism approach here. But then again, the concern is, what will it take for us to have a day where there is no load shedding in this country? Will it take the projected, permanent stage 2 and rolling blackouts for the next 2 years, and then thereafter it's all gone? What will it take?
Okay, so if you look at a country like Vietnam, they installed 9 gigawatts of rooftop photovoltaic panels, PV panels, in 1 year. So if we did that in South Africa, in 2 years, the whole private sector and small business sector and small companies, people like who've got big warehouses that use small amounts of electricity if they're not refrigerated, have got massive roofs. So the first thing that I would do is say, how much rooftop PV and battery backup can we get so there's no load shedding during solar hours? So that is from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m., including batteries. And then, people say, but if we do that, then the poor will not get electricity. But most poor people are employed in big companies, corporates, smelters, big shopping centers, companies that employ 10 to 15 million people between them, and they need electricity 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to run their operations. The private homeowners use 7% of South Africa's total electricity, although at peak time, it's a lot higher than that. So we need a process which says that we do need coal, we need our coal power stations to be operating properly. I've spoken at length about that over many years. There's new gas finds in Mozambique and Namibia. We need to get those on stream as quickly as possible. And then we need renewable energy, which means that we need PV panels, photovoltaic panels on roofs. The government says that we have a problem because if we install photovoltaic panels in the Northern Cape, which I agree has the most solar hours, then there's a problem evacuating that power, which means getting that electricity onto the national grid. But the fact of the matter is that every single person who has electricity now, whether they're in Bishop's Court or they're in Khayelitsha or in Houghton or Soweto, who has a roof, has the opportunity to interact with the grid and buy and sell electricity from the grid. And that can happen today, and it can happen in a very big way. So we need this mesh of everything coming together, and we need Minister Mantashe and President Ramaphosa to come to the table and say, wow, look what countries like Vietnam did in a year, let's do that here. And I think that we can make a difference really quickly. If we continue with a centrist approach, with government wanting to be responsible for everything, I think we're going to have load shedding for a long time to come.
Now, of course, you know, a lot of people are also not, you know, for the national state of disaster. You know, so when you consider it, some people who are pro say, of course, that this could put more megawatts in the thousands on the grid within a matter of months. And, you know, some of the other positives is that it could further develop diesel and natural gas generation capacity, you know, and like you also said, you know, building new power plants or fixing the old ones. But all of this will take significant amount of time. And as you've also indicated, there has to be a lot of oversight. But what about the positives?
The positives of declaring a state of disaster.
Yes, the ones that I've mentioned, that this could possibly see thousands of megawatts put back on the grid within a matter of months, up to 6 months.
You know, what we've seen since 2008 when the power crisis started, and actually 2003 when the government predicted the power crisis. In 2003, the government wrote a white paper where they said we're going to have load shedding from 2008 until 2030. So the government themselves have known about the problem for a long time. The government's saying that we're going to declare a state of disaster, if we already had strategies in place that would allow for decentralization, that would allow for rooftop PV, that would allow for embedded batteries in shopping centers and private houses and companies and so on, then I would say maybe it would help. But I don't see how declaring a state of disaster is going to help when what it's going to do is it's going to concentrate government decision-making into fewer and fewer people. And we know that when that happens, corruption rockets. And that worries me.
Worries a lot of people. Thank you so much, David, for your time this afternoon and your analysis. Really do appreciate it. David Lipschitz, CEO and founder of My Power Station.